Good morning, YouTube. Tired Metalhead Weatherman here. I hope you guys are doing well. As promised in last night's video, this morning we are going to be talking severe threat, and oh boy, there have been a lot of changes. Let's go ahead and get into some of them, shall we? So, as we look at the current picture right now, it's going to be a relatively quiet day as far as severe is concerned. We are still watching a winter storm over here towards the west, but for some reason it is not showing up on radar. I know it didn't just disappear, so and there's some weird stuff going on there. I'm gonna look into that a little further. But we still have an enhanced risk on Sunday, and now we have a slight risk on Monday. These are the 12Z outlooks, and these are prone to changing, but we have begun to see more of a trend back towards the west a little bit, towards the panhandle of Texas, towards the panhandle of Oklahoma now. Oklahoma City has now been downgraded to a slight risk, as well as Norman and Fort Sill, Wichita Falls 2. And areas off to the east have also been downgraded to a marginal risk. But over towards Abilene, you're still in the slight risk. Wichita City has been put in the slight risk as well. But now we're looking at places like Liberal getting back into the action now. Amarillo's on the fringe of this marginal risk. And now we're starting to look at a couple of towns involved, like Elk City, Enid, Altus, Weatherford, Oklahoma, involved in that enhanced risk now. Since we're within the 48-hour range, we can actually start to look at our hazard types. This is not a tornado-generated enhanced risk. This is actually a wind and hail-generated enhanced risk here. Like I said, this is more of a classic setup. It's going to be a dry line with this one, and that's where our forcing for these storms is going to be coming from. So as a result, this will limit the amount of time needed for a tornado threat to really materialize, like into a large outbreak. However, the threat of tornadoes cannot be ruled out. There's still an isolated tornado threat, mainly through Oklahoma here. On this little line between the Texas-Oklahoma border and Woodward, getting close to that Oklahoma-Kansas line is where the threat is greatest. So that being said, we know the three threats with that. Let's go ahead and actually look at day 3 now, which is interesting, and I think this is prone to changing as well, because I looked at some recent models here before I got into the video, and that's why I'm doing this a little bit later. But there's some interesting stuff that I've been finding. But for right now, though, this is what the Storm Prediction Center has issued. There is a slight risk that has been issued across parts of the Ohio Valley into Kentucky, mainly around central Kentucky. The marginal risk extends, all the way to the edge of the Kentucky-West Virginia line. Southern Ohio towards Cincinnati, you guys are involved in that. Just outside of Indianapolis, you guys have to watch out for the threat of severe weather. You guys are in that marginal risk, though. And then towards south central Tennessee, we'll have to watch you guys too. There could be a secondary area that extends a little further to the south, and we'll get into the details of that in a minute. We'll start out looking at tomorrow's threat, and then we'll kind of go from there. All right, so doing things at a little bit of a different pace here. We're going to work with the 500 millibar anomaly map here. Here's a winter storm, and that's why I know that radar is glitching a little bit, because that storm is still right there on top of them right now. So nothing has changed over there just yet. It's a little too soon for that, but this is the same storm system that's causing problems over the southwest that's going to end up sparking our severe weather event. Pretty robust system here, and then we also have to watch for wintry potential as this storm progresses off to the east, especially once we get towards parts of eastern Kansas and towards Missouri. We'll keep an eye on that. Mainly the snow threat's going to be towards the left side of this system, or the rear end of it. And then as we get towards the Ohio Valley, we'll clash with that warm air, and we'll see severe weather potential exist yet again. It's a pretty stout warm sector across the southeast here, and that collision could cause problems there as well. Problems a little further south, I think, and we'll get into the details of that, as for mentioned in the last segment of this video. So that's what we have going on in the short term. We'll do a whole weekend forecast before the end of this weekend to really get an idea of what's ahead here, because Now, as I've been talking about, and we're starting to see the effects of the polar vortex coming into play here. Big mass of cold air coming in, very frigid temperatures with this already. And there could be more on the way after this. It's going to be an active start to March, though, I can tell you that for sure. So let's go ahead and take a look at the low-level jet. We're now pretty well within range of a lot of the short-range models, so this is going to be a lot easier to forecast here. One thing I'd always can't stand about this, though, is this little hole, this little radar hole that seems to develop here. Whenever I look at the models out west, it just kind of blurs it out almost in a way. It's partially because of mountain interference. But this is heading into Sunday morning. We can already see that those increased values starting to roll into our area of interest. I'm going to roll this forward all the way to 18Z, and we already have our first maximum heading towards about 43 knots. About 60 miles an hour, I'd say. So by the time we get towards peak time for a severe event, we're starting to see near 60 knot values, pretty indicative of a damaging wind event. A lot of intense forcing going on here as well. Also, I do think there will be a capping inversion that will help limit some of the discrete storms. We'll have to see if this breaks or not. That's going to be the wild card in all of this. But even then, this stout wind maximum works its way off to the east and causes an increasing threat for severe weather, not just across the Ohio Valley, but I also think the southeast here. I think this threat is being slept on just a tiny bit because we do have a low-level jet around 50 knots across areas like Birmingham and Atlanta and a good portion of Tennessee past Nashville. So we're going to be keeping I'm going to keep an extra close eye on this and see if they end up adding this into the marginal threat at the very least. Do I think this warrants a slight threat, a slight risk type of threat level? I don't know for sure just yet. Even through looking on the models, I'm not entirely sold yet, but I'm definitely this definitely garners my attention. I'll put it that way. But that's pretty much what we're looking at as far as the low-level jet's concerned. When we look towards the temperatures, interesting situation there. It's not the best temperatures on a Sunday afternoon into Sunday evening. Right over here where we're expecting our storms to fire off at, we're not getting super duper warm. We're getting into the 70s here, mid 70s, but not really a lot going. And then by the time this threat starts to stretch off to the east here, we're losing that daytime heating. But interestingly enough, when we look towards Monday, different story. We're getting into similar temperatures, but that moisture is going to be a little bit just as rich, maybe a little bit more further to the south. So this is going to be interesting. Right over here where we have the Ohio Valley and parts of Kentucky in play here. Kentucky in particular looks really interesting because they're at 67 degrees right around the time I would be expecting those storms. Not to mention, this has that sort of semi-cold core look, but it's in a warm sector as well. So there's going to be a flashpoint somewhere around, I would say, central Kentucky. So eastern Kentucky, we'll have to watch you guys very closely too. But look at the temperatures across the southeast where we're getting into the 70s. Like, I'm going to click a sounding here, and guess what? Look at that. Probable hazard type. It's not marginal tornado. It says tornado. There is a very strong helicity right here where we're at 279 meters squared per second squared. It's not the best hordeograph I've seen, but if you look at the Cape value, we're near 500, which is usually that magic number where things can start to unfold here. One thing that I kind of think runs against it might be directional shear, but there is enough speed shear to overcome that. And then even if you look at this little indicator right here on the hordeograph here, this does indicate classic supercell here. So I find that interesting, and there's even a match on the sounding analog. So we're gonna have to watch. This is towards my area in Atlanta, so we're gonna have to watch this extra close. Not just necessarily because I live there, but just the fact that this area hasn't been even brought up for discussion yet. So a lot of people could get caught off guard if these storms were to form in this region. So that being said, we're just going to keep an eye on things and roll on from there. But after that, after Tuesday, the severe weather threat diminishes, and we're just right back on that warming trend across the south. And those warmer temperatures are starting to spread into the north as we get into the midweek. Take a look at the dew points next, and that's going to be another key parameter in these upcoming events. So, of course, as I've mentioned before in some of my Weather Nerd 101 videos with severe weather particularly, we mainly look for those higher dew points around 55 and up. Wow, I made it sound like senior. Jeez, I'm thinking too much. But one thing I want you to note is look at these dew points. The dew points don't make it quite, the richest dew points, I should say, don't make it that far to the west before running into that dry line here. So, I mean, we still get dew points close to 60, but that really rich moisture that could help fuel these storms isn't quite there. But as you can see here, it's more than enough. We got to have a probable hazard type of tornado with a dew point of 57 and a pretty strong storm relative helicity. Cape is pretty good with that. And the thing about this one is we're kind of going to be in a not really a slight like messy convective mode, but these are going to be like embedded supercells most likely. This leans towards that classic supercell look, so this might be just a little bit out ahead of the main line, but ultimately the parameters don't lead towards a massive tornado outbreak as of right now. We'll have to see if this changes, because this could literally change the day of. But I'll be here watching this, and I'll actually be looking to live stream with this. But another thing I want you to note is there is a capping inversion over this area as we head into the early afternoon hours, and this is going to be a key factor to a lot of things here. So the temperatures right now during that time are going to be pretty cold. So this is the same area where we were looking at that tornado threat earlier in the day. We're at a temperature of 57, dew point of 54, right? And then you see where these two lines are touching right here at the bottom here. That's towards the surface. That's warm air aloft. And this will inhibit storm development through the early part of the day. And this can do either one of two things. Either if the cap is too strong, it'll stop storms from developing entirely, which at this point right now it is. And then what will end up happening is as we get close towards that dry line, that cap will start to lift or move away, and then we'll start to get those storms firing. But what could happen if the cap breaks too early? We could end up seeing a situation in which we end up seeing a storm fire off early and use up the energy that we have in the atmosphere. So it's going to be interesting to see how things fall into place here. But I do think for the most part the cap will hold, especially given the lack of Cape value that we have during this time, which would be what's needed to really get those storms going. So as we move this forward, watch what happens as we head into Monday here. Dew points are still pretty strong as we head into that 21Z time frame across Ohio and parts of Kentucky here. We'll click the sounding, marginal severe threat. Very strong low-level helicity here, 197 meters squared per second squared. Not a supercellular look, though. This is going to be more of a linear type look. There could be a couple of discrete cells with this, too. Do I think this will warrant an upgrade to an enhanced risk? Hard to say. I'm kind of leaning towards no as of right now, but we'll look at this again tomorrow morning. But as far as severe threat, decent confidence. I'd say about 3 or 4 out of 5 as far as my confidence is concerned with that. But over here towards the south, like I said before, look at this. We're going to hit Atlanta again, right around 21Z. Dew points are very rich. Cape is pretty high. There we go. Again, and we'll actually switch this over towards Tennessee, right outside of Nashville here, where we have this little point where the dew point's about 62. Look at that, marginal tornado threat. That's a little bit close to a little bit closer to where that marginal tornado threat, the marginal risk is, excuse me. But the fact of the matter is, there's a very strong low level helicity here too, and this is a much better sounding than what's even in Atlanta. Well, the surface temperature is a little better in Atlanta, but even then, this is going to have to be watched really closely. This, however, doesn't have that classic supercellular look. This looks like it could be an embedded storm that could produce a quick spin up. So we could have a little bit of everything here on Monday even. This is not something that you just need to brush under the rug, so to speak. Not to scare anybody, but this is something that needs to be watched a little bit more closely, because whenever you see the enhanced risk, that's going to end up taking most of the headlines. So that's what we have going on there. Let's go ahead and shift over to some severe parameters like the mixed layer cape, and this is where things get kind of interesting. When we move this forward all the way into, let's say, the early afternoon hours of Sunday, already have a little pocket over here of storms that could develop a little further south. What ends up happening with this so far, it looks like nothing. And there's still a cap in place here too, as you can see right here. That's a pretty bad circle, actually. Let me try it again. Right where these two lines touch, that's where our cap is located. And you see that little lapse rate and that little spread between the two. That's warm air that is inhibiting storm development across this region. So like I said, there's a cap in place across a large sector of the southern plains here as we get into the early afternoon. But again, as that dry line comes in, watch what happens as we get increased cape values. Look at that. This is about maybe a frame from that one. Look at that. There we go. Hazard type tornado. Dew point near 60. Surface temp at 80. Storm relative helicity. High cape almost near 2,000 joules. And here we go. We're off to the races. Very quickly, this mode will go linear, and as we get into the overnight, we're going to lose our cape in daytime heating. But watch the resurgence that ends up happening as we come into Monday afternoon. This is across Atlanta, cape of 5,888 joules per kilogram. Tennessee, we're getting towards 600 joules per kilogram in some spots. And then over here, cape is lower, but the forcing is strong enough, and the warm and moist sector is sufficient enough to where storms are possible here too. We'll even have to watch towards Birmingham, where we have some moderately higher cape values here. Look at that. Tornado threat. Strong low-level helicity. I think that this area is definitely going to get expanded. I'm getting more and more confident even as I'm making this video. So we'll have to keep an eye on these guys over the next couple of days. And interestingly enough, there is a decent little cape return here towards southern Texas. Do I think a severe weather event will result out of it? Not right now. I'm going to keep an eye on this too, and we'll go from there. One other thing I'm going to look at before we go into the main radar look that we could end up seeing is the lapse rates, because there is an increased hail threat. We could see some pretty large hail too as a result. There are some pretty solid lapse rates with this system as we roll this forward here. So here we go, heading into Saturday night into Sunday. Excuse me if you heard that burp. But look at that, very high lapse rates here, about 8.5 degrees Celsius per kilometer. Usually about a 6 or 7 is sufficient enough. Even though there is a cap around this area and storms won't be developing at this current time, that just shows what we could be dealing with as time goes on here. Heading into 21Z, those are holding strong. So right along where those storms end up forming into a line, not only do you have the threat of damaging winds and tornadoes, you could see some pretty significant hail possibly. So we'll be watching this transition onward to the east, and of course, as we start to lose some of those dynamics, the hail threat will start to decrease. And then as we go onward, no storms are to be expected, so we won't have to worry about this right now. Over here where it's colder, those lapse rates are going to be a little bit more abundant, but that's just more or less going to be snow. That's pretty much what we have going on there. The last thing to look at here is the precip type. That's what our radar could look like over the next few days, I mean. And see, like I said early in the video, I guess there's something going on with the multi-regional radar of the National Weather Service, because there's still plenty going on over in this region. As time goes on, here's our line of storm starting to fire. Semi-discrete look earlier into the threat, and then as we push forward, there's that line of storms firing, and then we get some redevelopment going on as we push forward, right where that low gets a lot of forcing developing here. Given the high dew points and the warm temperatures across the southeast, it's not going to take much for anything to really go off here. Does this guarantee a tornado threat? No, but the threat is there, and a marginal risk could be put into effect for areas a little further to the south. We will have to watch this storm system as we go into Monday night into Tuesday for a winter weather threat across areas like Philly, New York, and across the Long Island area. Could be a quick hitting snowstorm, but you could see accumulation out of it as a result too. So we'll be watching that, and then there's another system over here that we'll be watching as well for the western half of the country once more. But that's the end of this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, you already know what to do. Hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already. Do the double click if you definitely haven't subscribed. Share this video to anyone that may find it useful. And of course, let me know in the comments what your thoughts are on the upcoming weather. But I will see you guys this afternoon. That's a fact. This has been Tired Metalhead Weatherman. I will see you later. Take care.